G'day, welcome back to episode 2 and maybe one of our last episodes for 2024 as well, which is crazy. We're still living my farming dream and trying to find a way to finance it. That's obviously all hypothetical. We're sitting down with Richard Brimblecombe, the CEO of Legacy Livestock, and understanding a little bit more about them and what they do, but also just the state of play and how farmers can finance their farm and what are some of the options in front of you today. This series has been sponsored by Legacy Livestock. We've got full editorial control, which means it's all my curiosities and questions and things that I'm hearing from you guys out there. So let's jump into this one. So to bring this series to life, I wanted to use, let's call it a hypothetical, but it's actually my childhood dream. I want to really have my own sheep and wool property. And so in this scenario, I've been able to do that with my family's farm. In the first episode, we spoke with Richard on his background and a little bit about the options out there. I shared with him what my goals were. I was trying to expand the operation to find some staff and spend a little bit more time in the office and building the business than actually with my hands getting into the nitty-gritty of day-to-day farming. As we know in farming, things can look good on the surface, yet sometimes out of the blue, things can start to unravel and they can come from left of field. Whether it's drought, disease, accidents, or other events that can pop up, they can catch us off guard. So how do we manage those situations, keep our eye on the horizon and where we're trying to go? Well, let's continue the conversation with Richard. Well, Richard, welcome back. In episode 1, we really, set the scene a little bit about my farming dreams and a little bit more about you and your background. In this episode, I'm keen to jump into look at some of the different scenarios that happen month to month, year to year. And I know if we look up the eastern seaboard, we know that people are living through Western Victoria, South Australia. It's been a really challenging season.
Yeah.
Queensland, Northern New South Wales, I know they've just got the crop off and some of them are really happy and the season's looking good, and that's right in your backyard. But for people who have literally just clicked on the podcast, maybe they've been on holidays and come back, can you just introduce who you are and what is Legacy Livestock?
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. So I'm Richard Brimblecombe. I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Legacy and co-founder. So Legacy Livestock is a specialist livestock financing company. We kicked the business off in July 2022, and we've built a really good presence up and down the east coast of Australia. We've got a great team of people in the business now, and we've got a really smart IT platform that we use to support our clients.
When you guys launched the business, it was a really interesting time for Australian cattle markets especially, but seasonally as well. Can you talk us through what those first kind of 6 months were like in business?
Yeah, it was, if I was going to start off a livestock finance business, the absolute environment that we opened up in is the environment that you wouldn't do it in. So it was a real baptism of fire for us. So opened the doors in July 22. For example, the Eastern Young Cattle Index, I think, peaked in around May 22 and started falling very rapidly. And in fact, from around May, June 22 to October 23, it dropped over 70%. And, we've studied all the records of the Eastern Young Cattle Index, and it has never fallen by that percentage and that dollar value in such a short period of time in the history of the ECI, and that goes back 30 odd years. So it was a pretty dramatic event. And the other thing that happened was, interest rates started rising from around 0.1% and very, very quickly went to 4.35% as in terms of the RBA cash rate. So we opened the doors in an environment where livestock prices were rapidly falling. Seasonal conditions weren't great and were deteriorating pretty rapidly, and interest rates were rapidly rising. So that sort of sets the scene for the first 12 months of the business for us.
So what are some of the calls that you're getting? Obviously, you're trying to establish a brand in its early stages, but what are some of the calls you're getting from farmers?
Yeah. So it was a very interesting time because we were very keen to write the business, and I think early on, the market had come off, but it was still it was still at really good levels, and so people were, I think, still fairly positive about the industry and the opportunity, and so we had, a lot of people who were happy to be in the market buying stock, and particularly if prices had come off the peak, the hope was that they might, rise again. So we were funding people into stock that turned out to be quite expensive, and so what we came to realise very quickly was that those clients were actually going to need some support to work through those trades. The first thing that happened was, people started asking for more time. So they'd bought the stock, they put some weight on, but because the market had come down so much, the value of those stock was now less, even though they were heavier, was less than the purchase price than they'd paid and any accrued interest. So they were of the view that they had pasture in front of them, the stock were performing well, that they could continue to put weight on, and that in the fullness of time the market would hopefully recover. And so for many of our clients, that's exactly what we did. We extended their loans, extended them again, and on the basis that they were comfortable, that they had the feed in front of them, and they felt there was reasonable prospects. And certainly the feedback we've had from our clients is they've been super appreciative of the way we've gone about supporting them.
And so when we looked at, in the first episode, my kind of scenario, which is the sheep and wool property, if we were to say, so we know that there's seasonal conditions that come in, like what you guys have experienced, but let's say something unpredictable happens and if there's in a horrible way, a death of a family member or a split of a partnership or whatever it might be, like in those scenarios and the real world scenarios that happen with farming families, if someone comes to you, like what are the options in front of them? And is it just on the livestock side of things that you guys are operating?
Yeah. So look, primarily it is the livestock side of things. And, we had an example recently of a family in Victoria, a couple of brothers, the succession's done, they're in control of the family assets, good operators, going well, and the marriage of one of the brothers has not worked out. And so they're, working through that situation and needed some cash in the short term, or alternatively, they needed to bring their wool clip forward, and they had a real problem with staple length and would have been heavily discounted. So, their broker actually introduced them to us. We made an advance against the upcoming wool clip and to give them the cash to actually deal with the immediacy, of the problem before them, keep the business moving along until their grain harvest came in, but also give them the opportunity to maximise the return from the wool clip. And the feedback from them was that for every dollar of interest we were charging, their return was something like $10.
And is that something you guys see in terms of that ability to leverage the finance to just really, like you are buying yourself time in the business?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think, that particular example is a good one where, they just needed more time to overcome a cash shortfall that was, brought about by an externality. So, they have a good base of assets. The bank was, supportive of them, but found it difficult to give them more money because of some of the, challenges around ownership of title and those sorts of things. And we were more than happy to make an advance against the future wool clip and fill that cash flow hole and support them through to the other side. So that's one example. I think the death in the family is a very interesting one as well. And unfortunately, it does happen in ag, and we have seen that in our time. A fatality on a farm and the ripple effects for everyone associated with that. And the important thing is to give people the space to grieve, to work through that really difficult personal situation and make sure that they've got the cash to actually keep the business functioning, so that when they're ready to return and focus on the operations of the business, that they've actually got a cash position that enables them to make the best decisions.
So one question I did want to ask you about, and it was, so if we look at in the middle of a challenging season, I'm paying, and I know of a few people who have done this year, paying an absolute fortune for stock feed. I've got quite a number of sheep on hand. I have kids in school, so I still want to be able to pay myself a wage while I'm kind of going through. We've got wages of staff that need to be paid, all those running costs, not necessarily looking to buy in stock. At that point in time, what are the options in front of me when we look at, say, traditional lending and then, let's say, alternative lending like yourself?
Yeah, I mean, your first option should always be to go to your bank. I mean, they've got the mortgage over the farm. They are in the best position of anybody to support you. But on the basis that things are looking a little negative, they're concerned for your cash flow. They're probably comfortable with the current level of exposure to you, but not enthusiastic about advancing more money, then you've got to look, at alternatives. And, certainly from our perspective, we've seen that scenario a number of times. And, we're not here to compete with the banks. We're here to provide a supplementary capital to primary producers to get them through a particular position, or to actually enable them to maximise the opportunity in front of them. So, in that scenario that you've just described, I'd be saying, look, you're going to have to form a view about, how much you're going to be prepared to spend on feed, how long you're prepared to ride this out, and actually have a marketing plan, or what specific objectives are you going to be working to. So that's really a matter for you, not for us, and we're going to back your judgment because we've made an assessment you're a good manager. But one of your options would be to say, well, look, I've got these stock, they're essentially unencumbered. I would like to seek an advance against the future income of those stock. So a cash advance or a cash advance to fund the cost of feeding those stock through for an agreed period of time, with a view that it will rain before we get to that period of time, or that if it hasn't when we've got there, you've got them there in really, really good condition, and they should be well met by the market because they're actually in really good condition, and there'll be a shortage of stock in good condition at that point in time.
And then and I know we're dealing with hypotheticals here, but I can't. If you get to that stage and it's still incredibly dry, and the person's going and they're thinking through, I've spent so much time and energy and years getting these genetics right, and it comes to these really highly emotional kind of decisions. How do they move through that next stage? Like, where's maybe the end point of, say, all right, we don't just keep financing with that roll on?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and that's where I think surrounding yourself with good quality advisors is important. So you really need an accountant who you can sit down and have a conversation with, a banker that you can have a conversation with. It's incumbent upon you as the business owner to do your own analysis, build your cash flows, understand the implications and maybe the trigger points for making your next decisions. So we're about backing good managers, people of good character, who've got good management skills, who are prepared to, establish a plan, work through it in a constructive way, but execute on that plan. And some of the decisions are difficult, and we've certainly seen situations where we've said to clients, so they're good people, with good management skills, they're on good properties, they know what they're doing, but the prospects, they aren't good in relation to a particular trade or a line of stock, and we've said to them, we will be comfortable for you to exit those stock, crystallise a loss, and to actually carry that loss on our balance sheet and support you. We know it's going to rain again. We'll park the debt and we'll support you on the other side. So when the opportunity presents itself and you can buy back in and you can start generating income again, then we can start chipping away at that debt that you've crystallised. But sometimes the best decision you can make is actually to quit the stock, take a loss and wait, because we just don't know how big that black hole will be that you're going to keep pouring cash into if you start that feeding program.
Hey guys, just taking a little bit of a pause mid-episode because we thought we were to tell you a little bit more about Legacy Livestock. They deliver livestock finance to progressive Australian producers. They know that the right livestock funding solution can help you realise the true potential in your paddock. And they know the best way is through livestock lending that really leans on the expertise that they've got. Reach out to them at legacylivestock.com.au to find out more. Now, let's get back to the episode. You touched a little bit there, and maybe you touched on all of them, but the considerations you've got for finance. Are you able to just spell them out a little bit more for me?
Sure. We look at 5 key things when we're assessing, if you like, the creditworthiness of a client. So those 5 things are character. So we're really interested in supporting people that have, multi-generational farmers. They've been there for a long time. The next generation's coming through. They're part of the social fabric of the local community, and their name is something that they value in the local community. The next most important thing is management. So have they got the skills to actually, manage through a difficult situation and also make the most of good opportunities that present themselves? So, Are they in control of their business? Do they understand, the relationship between the number of stock on hand and the availability of pasture? Have they got a plan? Those sorts of things. The next one is actually the structure of their balance sheet. So, is there a reasonable equity buffer in the business such that in the event things don't go well, we're actually going to feel comfortable to support them? That's important for us. We're happy to be supporting people who are having a red hot crack, but we also want to be backing people where we know we're going to be comfortable to support them through a difficult period. And that's really about the balance sheet structure. The next most important thing is historical livestock performance. So what evidence can they give us of their success in generating profitable income from their livestock business? If it's a breeding operation, we're really interested in calving and weaning rates, those sorts of things, and weights. If it's a trading operation, how successful have they been trading? What are their average daily weight gains? Those sorts of things. And finally, we want to understand the property and the quality of the property and how well suited it is to what that client is intending to do with us.
And then, so I was chatting to someone just the other day down on High Street, Armidale, and they work in finance, completely removed from agriculture. And I was explaining, obviously, that I was chatting to you and how it all works. They were asked around, what interest rates do they charge? How does that actually work? And so right now, actually, if we can look back, say, since you guys started in 2022, we had lower interest rates.
Yeah.
Can you talk me first through how that interest rate structure works for you, but how that works on that changing plane of interest rates?
The way, and we're a little bit unique in the market in the way we do things, but we have a variable interest rate, and it's basically linked to the bank bill, the 30-day bank bill swap rate. So that tracks really super closely to the Reserve Bank cash rate. So, I think most people know the Reserve Bank cash rate's 4.35, and the bank bill swap rate is super close to that, and it tracks that very, very closely. So we actually charge a fixed margin above that 30-day bank bill swap rate, and every month we just update that rate for any movements in the bank bill swap rate. So it hasn't really moved now for 6 or 7 months. But in the event that we get a rate reduction, which people are hoping for early next year, the moment that rate reduction flows through to the financial markets, we will pass that on to our clients on the first day of the very next month. But in terms of the bigger question around what are your rates, right now, bearing in mind they've increased by about 4.25% over the course, since early 22, but right now our rates are in a range of around 11.5 to 14.5%. And the initial reaction is, wow, that's a really high rate relative to what I'm used to seeing from my bank. And my response is, yes, it is. We don't have the benefit of a first mortgage. What we also know is that because we're funding, incrementally, the cattle or the sheep or the lambs that we're funding are lambs that otherwise wouldn't have been on your farm. What we see with those interest rates is clients generally making between $6 and $10 of gain in value of the livestock we fund for every $1 of interest they pay us. Yeah, so that's what we see, and we see it over and over again with our clients.
And that's coming back to that key thing that you said earlier around the bank's kind of the first point of call, and then you guys are that top up, the growth engine.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why we have a lot of there's a lot of perceptions around livestock finance is only for the battlers. Well, when I look at our customers, they're actually the opposite. They're really progressive producers. They're keen to grow. They're enthusiastic about the future and growing their business. They're wanting to provide, a bigger business for the next generation that's coming through, and so they're really dragging us along on a growth journey. They're well supported by their bank, but they're kind of tapped out with their bank, and not in a negative way. But the bank's saying, "Hey, we're really comfortable with where we're at," and the client's saying, "Well, look, we want to grow a bit quicker. We're going to have to raise some funding from somebody else to allow us to run our operation at 100% of the capacity that's there at the moment."
Based off what you've been saying and the default where I've fallen to, I've been thinking about it's that high performance business person, as opposed to you're not necessarily that interested in propping up someone who's just getting by to keep their business kind of float.
Yeah, no, look, I think that's right, and it's right for some really important reasons. So if you've got somebody who's struggling, we're probably not the right funder for them because, our rates are higher if there is a question about their ability to generate incremental performance, we're probably not actually the solution for them. The solution for them may, in fact, be to chip away and get the debt down. So we're really clear about who we want to be supporting, and typically it is that progressive producer who's looking to grow.
The other thing which I've heard kind of around the rabbit warren, which is agriculture. It might be true, it might not be. But so you're saying there's obviously this team, and it's that relationship with the bankers that is incredibly important. I've heard around the traps, I think it's been reported somewhere in the media, one of those normal media people, but around, like, unless you've got a certain amount of debt, then actually people are starting to, maybe not right now, but in the next 5 years, these larger banks could actually be pulling headcounts out of the regions and farmers who have that as a key part of their team actually starting to lose that direct relationship unless they are leveraged.
Look, that is a well-entrenched trend, so if you roll the clock back 20 or 30 years, every small regional town had multiple bank branches in it, and every one of those had a bank branch manager in that small town who could make decisions about lending to their farming customers. And 30 years ago, that was absolutely the case. And so one of the things that's happened is that the market has demanded lower interest rates and lower margins from the banks. And I'm not here to stand up for the banks, but I do want to be factual. And the reality is that farmers today are paying materially lower interest rates to their bank, or margins to the bank, than they did 30 years ago. And the consequence of that is that the banks can't afford to actually keep high quality people in small regional centres on a reasonable salary on the margins they're charging their bank clients. So I think you can't have a low margin and really high service at the same time. So I think farmers have generally said, well, we value the lower margin more than the high service. Now, maybe that wasn't a conscious decision, but I think a consequence of the pursuit of the lower rate, there's been a withdrawal of service from regional areas because it's no longer economic for the banks. So, again, I want to be really clear. I'm not here to bash the banks. I just want to be, really clear about, the fundamentals of what's happened. But what that means is if you're a young aspiring agricultural producer and you're coming through, you don't have a relationship anymore with a really good quality banker who's experienced and very good at what he does. And typically most banks find it difficult to provide really good quality relationship management services to clients that owe less than $3 million. And there is some talk in the industry about that possibly lifting to 5 in the near future. So I think there's a real challenge out there in terms of who can I go to talk to understand what the bank's looking for from me with my business if I only owe $2 million or $1 million, or it's a big amount of money, but relatively speaking, the banks are saying it's difficult for us to provide a quality service offering to you at the margins we're making. And that's where I think there's a real opportunity for specialist livestock financiers.
Absolutely, and I guess it is that risk, isn't it? It's that natural evolution that's happening, but you become a number.
Yeah. So as a general rule of thumb, we won't do business with someone unless one of our team have been on farm. We like to sit around the kitchen table and understand their goals and their ambitions and their aspirations and where we can assist them to get there. And then we like to jump in the Toyota and go for a bounce around the paddock and actually see what they're doing, get a really good understanding so that the offer we come up with to support them is really relevant for their business.
The farm tour. That's what I said. That's where the real business happens.
Yeah, that's right. That's where all the fun is for us.
Absolutely. That's what you do it for. Beautiful. No, well, Richard, I think, that's been really interesting to look at maybe some of those different misconceptions and ways of using it. So I'm looking forward to the final episode.
Thanks, Ollie. Me too.
Well, that's it for episode 2. We are really getting into the nitty-gritty and exploring my dream farming possibilities. If you do want to know more and reach out to the team at Legacy Livestock, hit them up at legacylivestock.com.au. As Richard and I have talked about so far, there are some highs and lows that come with farming. And things are changing. So what are the options in front of you? How do you get ahead? How do you progress your business into what it could be? For me, I'm hoping that one day I'll be able to pass this business on to the next generation and that they'll be able to create their own legacy and make the most of the opportunities in front of them. If you're not following the Humans of Agriculture podcast, hit subscribe and follow us on your favourite podcast platform. If you've got a topic or a conversation or a guest that you'd love us to talk to, hit us up, humansofagriculture.com. We'll see you next time. See ya.